Hello, I'm EVM and welcome to Extra Content Tuesday, which is looking at this time an article from the Times newspaper, what I would call a proper newspaper, as opposed to the other stuff that I've looked in over the last few weeks, from tabloid-esque stuff, shall we say, that essentially just take a social media post, call it an article and then consider that news. So I'm hopeful on this one that it will actually be reasonably accurate and well researched. The article itself is about overstaying fees when you're at a charge point. So let's go through it and see if it's realistic. That's all I ask for. If you want to read this article yourself, then you're going to have to go to the Times and subscribe to it. I will put a link to the Twitter post that I discovered this article from, that generated some tweets, shall we say. So if you do want to have a look at what I saw, then click on that. And whilst you're there, why don't you follow me on Twitter as well at EVManUK. So, the headline: the new parking fine coming for electric vehicle owners or car owners. Rising electric costs and the introduction of punitive penalties at charging points are taking the shine off electric car ownership. The article starts: they used to be celebrated as the greenest of cars. Now, this is, before we get into the article, this is a mini bugbear of mine that everybody seems to do, other YouTube channels, articles. They used to be seen as the greenest of things. It's become like a stigma now to own an electric vehicle because you're seen as green and, I don't know, woke and militant vegan, an environmentalist. Again, it's like a stigma by owning one. And putting at the beginning of an article, they used to be celebrated as the greenest of cars. They still are, as far as I know, regardless of cost to run one, which has changed a lot. So why bring it up? Why bring the environment into an article about parking fines? Let's move on. So don't consider that a critique of the article, just a bit of an annoyance I have with everything. Used to be celebrated as the greenest of cars, which could cost nothing to charge, little to park, and attract a big tax break when you bought one. But electric car owners are facing a new penalty: the introduction of fines and extra fees if they spend too long at an electric charging point. It then goes on to give us an example of a driver, which I'll come back to, and tells us about certain networks that have started doing these fines. It even says here, for some time Tesla has had an overstay fee of between 50 pence and £1 per minute on its network, depending on how busy the site is. So this isn't new. This is one slight oddity. I mean, I don't mind somebody doing an article about overstay fees. It needs highlighting, it's a good thing. But it's nothing new. The Lake District did this about 4 or 5 years ago to stop this from happening, because they asked lots of people who drive them, me included, what do you want when we put these in? And we're like, overstay fees, overstaying fees. So this isn't new, so I'm not sure what triggered this article. Maybe an expansion. It's a big expansion into other networks. Then we see this paragraph, which is where for me it starts to go off a little bit. The fees have come as a nasty shock to electric vehicle drivers. They haven't at all. I mean, if you look at a dictionary, nasty, bad or very unpleasant, a nasty shock. A bad or very unpleasant shock to electric vehicle drivers? No, it isn't. We've been screaming for this for years. Again, some networks have done this for a long time. So it's not a shock because it's pre-existing. It's just getting more widespread. So I don't understand where that came from. That makes no sense at all, especially when you consider that several people, I think about half a dozen, were actually contacted, which is a good thing, as part of research for this article. ZapMap, Quentin Wilson, CarWow, and Andrew Till, a fellow YouTuber who I have spoken to about this very article. He's got grief from people like me saying, how did you let this happen? And he went, no, I didn't say that at all. I said, this is a very good thing. I said, this is something we've been crying out for. In fact, he gave me a couple of examples. Something that needs to be done. I haven't heard any negative complaints. I feel it's something the industry needs. This is what was said to the person who wrote this article by Andrew. Even the quote from Quentin Wilson, if I go find it, give me a second. EV drivers understand the need for idler fees and they will be the first to say, right, I got to shift my car. It's absolutely right to do that because somebody else needs to use the charger. The word shock doesn't make sense when everybody is saying this is a good thing. And then the next paragraph kind of brings in that thing that that does bug people like myself. My channel wouldn't exist, I guess, with things like if things like this didn't exist. Even the most rapid chargers take longer than filling up a car with fuel. Correct. And the rise of overstay charges mean that drivers may not want to risk leaving their car plugged in while busy with other activities such as shopping or going to a restaurant or cinema. They may not want to risk it, something that they've been wanting for a long time. I mean, I think this for me could be a misunderstanding of what the difference between a destination charger and a rapid charger is, although Andrew said he did discuss this. Destination charger would almost certainly have zero overstaying fees on there because it's a destination charger. It's a slow, much cheaper charger that you would use to because you're going to spend a long time there. Rapid chargers, so that's the ones that you see at service areas and things like that, that does make sense, and it even says so in this ZapMap quote. The introduction of overstay or idling charges makes sense on high-powered rapid chargers where charging time is short, and it's important that the chargers are freed up for other EV drivers. Exactly, and as far as I can tell, and I've looked at many, I can't find a single one, again destination chargers, that have that. Drivers may not want to risk leaving their car. Now, if you think I'm being picky here, I'm not, because that brings in this good old, if I use a social media phrase, FUD, fear, uncertainty and doubt. Anyone that's not familiar with EVs at all would go, oh, hang on a minute, so you're telling me if I go to a cinema and I plug it in, I'm at risk. A destination charger would be a parking bay with a charger. A rapid charger or an onward travel charger would be an electric charging bay, i.e. if you're not charging, you move, very much like a petrol pump. Why introduce the word risk, nasty shock? It's kind of sensationalist and ultimately the opposite to what the research suggested, as far as I can see, and certainly what Andrew said, from what Quentin Wilson said, from what ZapMap said. It then goes on to talk about the cost of installing chargers and so forth. No problems with any of that. Again, go and read the article if you want to read the whole thing there. Now, if I go back to near the beginning, the one that I skipped earlier was an example of a van driver that was used in this article to highlight, presumably, these shocking new chargers or punitive penalties. One driver left his van charging overnight at a service station on the M4, expecting to pay £26, and was horrified when an overstay charge of £123 was levied earlier this month. Paul Jackson, chief executive of the Miles consultancy, which advises firms on how to cut costs on company cars, said the charges are catching out 1 in 6 motorists each month. I'd like to see those stats. Anyway, he said the van driver on the M4, whose employer was a client of Jackson's consultancy, was aggrieved because the employer refused to pay the levy. The driver insisted he had no choice but to charge overnight because he could not interrupt his work to top up the battery during the working day. Do you want me to get up at 2 AM to pick it up? The driver asked. Now again, this doesn't make much sense to me, so shall we have a look through what I think has happened based on what this is giving me? Now, for me, the devil's in the detail. If one little thing is slightly off, fair enough. But when you get a few little things, then red flags start to fly. And this is what I picked up on when I first read it. So the driver left his van charging overnight at a service station on the M4. So we know he's pretty much almost certainly at a grid served charger at the services, expecting to pay £26. Now that's oddly specific. You don't know how much fuel's going to cost you until you're finished, whether it's petrol or electric or diesel or whatever. There's some basic figures being done here, some basic sums, rather than actual what happened on the night. Because if we take £26 and then divide that by the 65 pence per kilowatt hour grid served charge, which is 0.65, that equals exactly 40 kilowatt hours. I wonder if he's got an E&V 200 van with a 40 kilowatt hour battery and has just done the basic sums. I've looked at all this, done some sleuthing, and I think this is what probably did occur. So what I believe he did was take this badly drawn van, plug it in at the services. He then walked over I'm guessing he got there at maybe midnight, sometime late, and went straight to bed. He then walked over to the hotel and put his registration number into the hotel's check-in systems. I've done this many times myself. When you stay at a service area that's got a hotel, you put your registration in so you can get free overnight parking at the services. However, you have to use the specific parking area that's kind of cordoned off, if you will, for the hotel to get you that free parking. You can't just leave it anywhere in the services. However, he has left his van at the charge point, which is inside the services, not in the hotel's parking bays. So that means that he's only got the 2 hours free charging that you get at services, and he would be liable for a parking fine, which funnily enough is, at a lot of services anyway, between £60 to £100. And in this case, I imagine it will be a £100 fine. But it's not just that, you have to pay for the fuel, for the electricity that he used when charging his vehicle. And if you look at the £123 that he paid, I read that as that is his total amount rather than on top of his fine, then £23 divided by 65 pence per kilowatt hour on a grid serve charger would be a roughly 36 kilowatt hours worth of energy. So £23 for your fuel, £100 for the parking fine because he's parked overnight, and we end up with £123 of total cost. So ultimately, he's got a parking fine, not an overstay fine, backed up by the fact that I can't find any evidence at all, and I knew this beforehand if I'm honest, that GridServe actually have any. They don't have any overstay fines. That's the first thing I would have thought would have been picked up on. As an example in this article, again, it makes it irrelevant. It's a wrong example because he hasn't got an overstay fine, he's got a parking fine. Now we could have still used this example if you'd have flipped around this whole article to be educational rather than sensationalist. What I would have liked to have seen or read or wrote if I'd done it myself is EV chargers have been calling for overstay fees for years and they finally got it. EV owners are rejoicing because charges for idiots like this guy are now coming to play. I would have then used this example about the van driver blocking a charger for 6, 7, 8 hours whilst he's sleeping at a service area. I mean, think of the arrogance of that. Oh no, I'm not going to get up at 2 a.m. and I'll come back to that in a second because it wouldn't be true. I'm not going to get up, I'm going to leave it there and block the whole charger at a service area of all places for, again, 6, 7, 8 hours, however long he's asleep for. He's a perfect example as to why these charges exist, to stop that from happening. And hopefully, now he's been fined, because I'm going to guess he's probably done it before, but now he's been fined, it might not happen again. And again, the evidence is backed up by the fact that his employer said, no, we're not paying this, because they knew, after presumably an internal investigation of sorts, that it was his fault. So what would I have done in this situation? As an EV experienced driver, and again, this could come down to his employer not giving him enough information, so it's not all on the driver, I would have plugged my van into the charger as he did. I would have then gone to the hotel, walked across the car park, checked in, put my registration in, and then gone to my room. Got my bags in place, brushed my teeth, gone to the toilet. I would have basically done everything you do to go to bed. Again, we're assuming he went straight to bed. By that point, you've probably had, 15, 20 minutes gone by? Even on a 40 kilowatt hour Nissan ENV200 van, which charges probably the slowest out of all vans, up to 50 kilowatts, and assuming the charger was also only up to 50 kilowatts, that would have been on probably, if he arrived near empty, 55 to 65% after about 20 minutes. So I would have gone back to the van and gone, ooh, right, it's on 60 odd percent. So I've got a choice. Do I stay here for another 15 minutes-ish, maybe 20 tops, and then move the van to the appropriate parking spot? Or do I move the van anyway and then the next morning charge it for another 15, 20 minutes whilst I'm having breakfast? That van driver knew what he was doing. It's his responsibility. As I said, his employer didn't pay for it because it was his fault. He was just basically being very arrogant, quite frankly. He's saying, I'm not getting up at 2 a.m. Even if he arrived at midnight, by the time he got to bed, you're probably looking at losing 15, 20 minutes sleep. And in that situation, I would have said, yes, I'm going to charge my van during my work day. His employer owned the van, so it's a company van or whatever. He's been given that. So I wouldn't use my own time to fuel it up. I would say, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to be late for my first visit, whatever it is he's doing, because I have to charge this van you've given me. Whether it's suitable or not is immaterial to this example. If that's what your work's giving you, then ultimately that's what you use, and you charge it during the work's day. Or you'd just done what a sensible person did. It's just plugged it in and walked off. The sort of person you see at a Holiday Inn BP charger who does the same thing. Right, well, after all that, what do you think? Am I being harsh, accurate, or somewhere in between? So it's not bad. I mean, there's so much worse out there. You know, the previous stuff I've looked at was just awful beyond belief. This, I'm confused, given the level of research was done, which is excellent, from what I can see anyway, and the various people that were spoken to. I don't understand how A has been flipped round to be something completely... A has gone to Z. It doesn't ring true in my experience, nor the people he's spoken to. Right, that's it, we're done. For 99p, you can join the channel, not just become a subscriber, and you get videos that go up normally on a Friday, on Sunday instead, so you get it a lot earlier, and there's a live members-only stream at the end of every month, as well as occasionally members-only videos. So yeah, thanks if you do spot the channel that way for doing so, and liking, subscribing, all the usual rubbish. So yeah, cheers guys, I'll see you soon.